into the CrewForLife.com Frankly Speaking Studios. Let's welcome all-star third baseman who played for the Baltimore Orioles and California Angels. Let's welcome in Doug Decinces. Doug, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. I want to thank you very much. I know it's close to the holidays, and I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I figured if there's enough people, baseball fans out there that want to talk baseball, I can certainly do it.
Well, we appreciate that. Well, Doug, I remember you real well. I grew up in the 80s. I obviously watched your, first memory of you, of course, with the Baltimore Orioles. I always wanted to ask you this question, and we heard about this recently when, Derek Jeter, one of the better shortstops of all time, retired from the New York Yankees. I mean, how much pressure when you came up as a rookie was on you because it's one thing to become a rookie and have to play in Baltimore. It's another thing to have to relieve probably the best player of all time to ever play, and of course the best defensive third baseman in Brooks Robinson. I mean, how much extra pressure did you feel on yourself?
Let's just say it was tough enough just getting to the big leagues of the Oriole chain and then having to play for a manager who didn't really like rookies. And on top of that, to say that I had to come up and be the heir apparent to Baltimore's greatest living athlete. He and Johnny Unitas were, the two greatest athletes that they've ever had. And I had to replace one. And when I took the field, fans weren't too excited to see this California kid come out here and try to replace their hero. So it wasn't a real warm and friendly reception. And everywhere I went, I came up to the Orioles as a shortstop, second baseman. And after my first year in the spring training, I got sent down to AAA, and they said, "We want you to go down and play third base. We know you can play second and short." And I looked at them, and I said, "You crazy? I don't want to be going down replacing Brooks Robinson." And they said, "Look around the infield, Doug. Bobby Grich just replaced Davey Johnson, and it took him a while to do that. And Mark Belanger's still young, and he's got 8 Golden Gloves. The only next place that's going to be open is third base." And so I said, well, I guess there's no other alternative. So I took it upon myself, but I didn't really understand what it was going to be like until I actually had to do it.
And, you look at those teams you had in Baltimore, just incredible. Of course, you can start with this pitching staff of Flanagan. You had 2 Martinez on your team. Tippy was one of them. I know that. You had Jim Palmer. You had McGregor, Steve Stone. But that infield, and, the people already said when you were growing up, as a kid, you have favorite players on favorite team. Well, back then, when you talked about shortstops, a lot of your shortstops did not hit well. I mean, if they hit over 200, you were happy back then. But the defense they could play was just incredible. And one of my 2 favorite shortstops growing up, before the Ozzie Smith era, was Bud Harrelson from the New York Mets and Mark Belanger from the Baltimore Orioles. I mean, how much easier did Mark make it for you to play third base with having him next to you?
You know what? Mark was outstanding to have as a teammate. First of all, he's an intelligent man, and he knew how to guide me along and talk to me about position plays and things like that. But more importantly, having that kind of confidence to the left of you really helps out. I mean, and having Bobby Grich at second base, that really helps out. I knew I didn't have to be perfect in making double plays or things like that. I knew where, that I didn't have to cover more than I needed to cover because Mark was going to be there, which allowed me to cover more of the line. And, but the mental part, Mark was outstanding in helping and guiding me along. And so was Bobby Gritch. And the reality is, Brooks Robinson did a lot to help me out. Brooks was a wonderful guy.
Yeah. And, obviously, as we look at a picture of you here, I'm going to show you a little highlight, Doug, that I pulled up that I know you're going to love. And I know you remember it real well. I'm going to take myself out of the picture, okay? And I'm going to pull this up. And after we show this, it's about a 25-second video, I'll let you see if you remember this night, okay?
All right.
Let me see if I can get
1-1 by Childick. Here's a fly ball to deep left. Get out of here! Get out of here! Go on! Home run! Every Oriole is at the plate. Decinces, a two-run homer. The Orioles win the ball game, 6-5.
That was a night where you guys were behind it. You just came back, and everybody talks about that being the magical night in Baltimore history back then, when you guys, it was one night one night Eddie Murray, another night, I believe, a guy named Ray Crowley, if I remember the names correctly. Just that you guys went on this epic winning streak that it seemed like everybody was contributing and you were winning the games at the end.
Well, first of all, I didn't get to see the video again, but I know exactly which one it is. It was
okay,
Oriole Magic.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the one I showed.
Okay, well, let me explain a little bit about that. The team, I had my best year in '78, the first year where Brooks wasn't in uniform, and I was able to play every day. And then in '79, I started off really well, and then I hurt my back, and so I was out for about 6 weeks, and I had just started coming back from that injury. But the team was starting to gel; they were starting to play well. We didn't have a real fast start, but things were starting to go together, and then it was just an opportunity. When it came to that night, the fans had started to realize, and I think there was a promotion. It was a Saturday night game, and there were 36,000 fans there. And I just happened to come up with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning, and the fans were standing, cheering, in anticipation for something to happen, which is kind of a rare thing. They were into the game. They wanted something. There were runners on base. They just wanted a win. And then when I hit that home run, it was like the fans actually believed it was going to happen. And when it happened, the place went crazy. It just went crazy. And the next, earlier in that game, Kenny Singleton had hit a home run. The next night, Oriole Magic just became an unbelievable thing. We had the Wild Bill Hagee in the right field stands leading cheers. Fans were having a ball at the ballpark. And the next night we came back up, and yes, Terry Crowley hit a game-winning home run. Then the next day, Eddie Murray did. And it just became some sort of a catch there that maybe the Orioles really had magic. And the fans just connected. It was a very rare experience because, Baltimore was a tough town in baseball going through there. The most attendance we would get at a game was a Yankee game, and half of them were for the Yankees. So
right.
When you have that many cheering at your home stands, your home field for the other team, it makes it a little difficult. But it made it a complete romantic change between the team and the fans that night, and I was just proud to be a part of it.
Now, in 1979, I believe you won the pennant, didn't you? That was the team that went far into the playoffs. How special was it for you when you came up, right away pretty much? Here you are getting introduced to postseason baseball.
when I first came up, it was 1973, and they were in the hunt, and I came up and had to play it through that a little bit, and I thought it was just a great opportunity, but I didn't get to go to the playoffs. But in '79, I wasn't that young. There were guys who were other younger ones than myself. I had gone through the whole replacement issue, and I've been there for 5 years.
Right. Now, but winning in Baltimore, there's no greater fans when you win in Baltimore, is there?
It can be fun. It definitely can be fun.
So let's talk about, I mean, in 1980, before we get to the trade to California, you had the opportunity to play with, for Earl Weaver. I mean, to you, what was Earl Weaver like as a manager?
Interesting question. Earl was very difficult to play for. As a rookie, I was the only rookie on the team, and my first year, and I heard he didn't like rookies, and sometimes somebody would screw up out in the field, and he'd be upset at them, and he'd come down and he'd be using some foul language, and he'd look at me and say, "You ever do that, you'll never effing play for me," And I'm sitting there on the bench, but I was his frustration relief guy, I guess. He'd walk away, and some of the other guys would be laughing and come by and say, "Don't worry about that." I go, "What do you mean? I'm a rookie. Don't worry about that." He was tough to play for as a young player. He expected you to do things, and he wanted absolutely zero mental mistakes on the field. But what I learned through Earl, and to his credit, Earl understood how to put together a team and what he expected his players to do. And his theory, as he told me later when the day after I got traded, we had the best conference. I played for him for 9.5 years. I get traded to the Angels, and he and I have 2 hours on the phone talking, more than I probably did the whole other times that I played for him for 9 years. But he said, "Look, my theory is I'm hard on guys because if you can't take me, I don't want you up there with the game on the line in the bottom of the 9th inning. And if you can handle me, then I've got faith that you're going to be able to handle yourself up there." And that was his kind of theory. So, it's kind of old school, but you had to deal with it. And I learned to deal with it and maybe a better player. So that aspect for Earl, although it was hard, but I still was able to come through it, and other players were able to come through it. And, those players that came through went on and had great careers.
Now, Doug, were you okay getting traded? And I ask you this question to California because, there was some publicized info that you and Jim Palmer weren't getting along too well and things like that, because of the way, he would say some things about Brooks to you, try to get under your skin. I mean, when you got traded, some players, you weren't traded, once in your career, I think, maybe twice with St. Louis, where players...
No, I was only traded once. St. Louis I was a free agent.
Right. That's what I thought. So you traded once. I mean, what was that feeling like? I mean, were you comfortable with being traded at that time? Or would you have been more happy at that time staying in Baltimore?
It was right after the 1981 strike, and I happened to be ahead of the Players Association through the 81 strike and was in the negotiations, but I represented the American League rep, not a team rep, and I was involved in every meeting, and Edward Bennett Williams was my owner at the time. And heck, this guy was living on my phone more than I was. I mean, he was calling, trying to get inside the whole time. He was under severe financial stress. He bought the team, and prime interest rate was at 17 at that point in time. And, he had actually would fly me down from the New York meetings, have dinner with him, and have a car drive me to my house. And the next morning I'd get back up and get in the train and go back to New York and go into the meetings. But at the end of this, I knew, he one time told me that I was lying to him, and I told him that, I'm never going to lie to you. When this thing's over, you're my owner. Why would I lie to you? He goes, well, you're not telling me what I'm hearing. I said, I can tell you what they're telling you is not the truth, and I am. And when he found out later that I was telling him the truth, he lost face with me. And instead of coming over and saying, I appreciate everything you did, he just didn't want anything to do with me anymore. And at that point, I had heard that some young punk named Cal Ripken Jr. was going to come up and try and play third. Here I am replacing Brooks Robinson, and then I got to have Cal Ripken Jr. coming up. But I knew that Earl Weaver did not want Cal to play third. He wanted me to play third and Cal to play short. Well, the owner came in and made the trade, and Earl called me up and said, Doug, this is the first time ever in my career as a manager that I had an owner tell me who my team was going to be, and I'm going to retire at the end of this season. And you know what? A little bit. And but Jim and I are friends today, and we didn't have it wasn't a love-hate relationship. Maybe more, he had that with Earl Weaver more than he had it with me. But there were just some times that Jim needed to be put in place by an everyday player, and I just happened to be that guy, I guess the leader on the team, that said, hey, enough of that. And so there would be some times we would go at it, but Jim was a phenomenal athlete, one of the greatest pitchers of all time.
Yeah.
And if there was a big game, I certainly would want him on the mound on my team. So as far as that with Jim, those were just isolated incidents that sometimes the press reach out and give. But all in all, Jim was great. He was a great player.
Now you go to California, and right away you guys win. I mean, you go there, you win a Silver Slugger Award, you win an All-Star game. You get named to an All-Star game. You guys get to the ALCS. Everyone remembers that memorable series with the Boston Red Sox and Dave.
That was 2 years. That was 86. The first.
No, but 86 was right. I know. I'm jumping ahead here. That was 86. I remember because the Mets ended up winning the World Series that year. But in 82, you get that. Then 4 years later, you go to there. I mean, it seemed like you had a pretty successful time through your tenure in California.
You know what? I was very fortunate. Interesting enough, there were that 82 team was as good of a position player, man-for-man team that I think I ever played on. We did not have the pitching anywhere close to the pitching that the Orioles had. And I'm saying that gracefully because, Eddie Murray was at, first base, a Hall of Famer, and we had Rod Carew, Hall of Famer. Bobby Grich was at second base. We had Richie Dower. He wasn't Bobby Grich, but solid player. And we had Foley, and then all of a sudden the Orioles had Cal Ripken playing short. I was at third. We had Brian Downing and Fred Lynn and Reggie Jackson, and Don Baylor was the DH, and we had Bob Boone behind the plate. And Bob got traded because he was the National League player rep, and I was the American League player rep. We both got traded to the same team. Funny how that works when you're in that, but it was an outstanding team we had. And defensively, it was really good. And I was just fortunate to go from one great team to another great team. And we all had, that offensive lineup in 1982 was probably one of the best in history. I have to say that. It'll go up there against there's a lot of groups that have that unbelievable, but combined with defense and offense, it was one of the best.
Yeah, they definitely was. Now, let me ask you this. After that, when you were finally, the Baltimore Orioles put you in their Hall of Fame, the Baltimore Orioles Hall of Fame, what did that mean to you? I know you love Baltimore, like you said.
You know what? I appreciate you saying that, because the opportunity to come back, I felt like the artist who died and his paintings became famous. It was such a nice award for me, because when I was there, I always was the replacement for Brooks Robinson, and I was never going to be Brooks Robinson. I always had that feeling, and there were fans. I have to tell you, it wasn't easy, replacing him. And there were fans. I used to get hate mail, not fan mail. And it was tough, and the press was critical. The press was critical when I was on the road, saying, is this guy ever going to be able to replace Brooks Robinson? And so it left that feeling. But then to come back and recognize that, I always felt it was one of my greatest accomplishments as an athlete. Wasn't so much any home run or anything like that. It was the fact that I was able to survive and have my own career after replacing such a living legend. There aren't many guys in the game that have been able to go on when, you could probably name them on one hand how many guys that took over for a Hall of Fame great player like Brooks Robinson and went on to have their own career. And I looked back at that, and I felt like that was a kind of a crown for me when I got put in the Oriole Hall of Fame, and I was very humble, very humble.
Now, you played third base throughout your career, and I wanted to ask you this. You look at today's game, completely different game that, we know that. But, it seems like small ball has been taken out of the game, compared to when you played with Weaver and Billy, the Billy Martin guys, the Gene Walk guys, the John McNamara, and all those different managers back then. Small ball was very common. Now today, it's not common. Does that make the game, third base is a tough enough position, being the hot corner, but does it make it easier today for a third baseman because small ball is taken out of the game?
I believe so. You're going to stand back, guys. Sometimes I wonder how much the third baseman actually plays third base. They got him shifted all over the place now.
Yeah.
But when you had guys that could hit for power and still bunt and run, it made it very difficult. Playing third base, you didn't get the benefit of playing 15 feet behind the bag or 20 feet behind the bag all the time. Today's players, it's big swing baseball right now.
Yeah.
And I kind of chuckle at it a little bit. I sometimes think that I'm not a believer in all that, but I'm not playing today. I watch TV, and when I see nobody's at third base and it's the start of an inning and you got a shift on, and the left-handed hitter can't just square around and put a ball on the ground, on the other side and walk to first base, and not even have to run to first base to get a base hit and get on base for your team. And I see guys in double play situations, they don't change their swing. They don't do anything to hit to win the game. Their whole theory is, well, I'm still going to try and yank the ball out of the ballpark. Yeah. Now, we hit a lot of home runs on the teams I played. My gosh, that Angel team and the Oriole teams. I'm going to take the Angel team in 1982. Brian Downing led off at 28 home runs. Carew wasn't a power hitter, but the guy was hitting 400 playing the second. And then you either had Gritch with 22 home runs, you had Reggie with 39, you had me with 30, you had Baylor with 26. You had Freddie Lynn with 24. pretty solid back then, and it wasn't, the way the baseball is today. I mean, it's a hard baseball they're playing with today. I mean, they've designated this game for power. Clearly, the ownership and everybody has. But in the same token, the game is so different. They're playing, but Earl Weaver what was Earl Weaver? Pitching, defense, and a 3-run home run. It seems like it's gone pitching, 3-run home run, and don't worry about the defense as much.
Yeah. Now, which game did you like better?
Well, I only played my game. I can't say
But
that.
when you look at this game, do you like the style you played back then because you played it, obviously, or do you think you would have enjoyed today's game more?
I liked what we played. I have a hard time with players, always swinging for the fences when the game's on the line, and all you got to do is get a base hit.
Right.
Or hitting the ball on the ground the other way to move the guy to third base with less than 1 out, or that kind of baseball. I think is to me is what I grew up on and what I thrived on. I'm not criticizing today's game. Please don't get that right. You asked me how I feel about it.
Right.
I absolutely love the way I played. Because every time I went on the field, the only thing I was interested in was winning. I didn't care if I hit all the home runs or whatever. I only wanted to win, and winning was more important than my personal stats. And I find in today's game, when there's a situation, the guy's still swinging one way for the fences, it's all about the personal stats for me. And maybe that's what's driven all these guys to make as much money as the personal stats. I don't have the answer, but it's certainly, they don't care if you strike out. I can remember, if guys are getting 150, 100, 200 strikeouts, but if they're hitting 30 home runs or more, it's okay. Or they're driving in, they think it's okay. I never had 100 strikeouts in a season. It's so common for these guys now.
Yeah. Well, listen, Doug, I want to take the opportunity to thank you so very much for joining us on Frankly Speaking Sports tonight. It's been a pleasure having you, reminisce about your career.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to have me. It's been a long time since I was on the field, but I enjoy having my grandson play the game, and both my grandsons do it, and I teach them the old way. Sorry.
That's good. Keep doing that.
All right.
All right, Doug. Have a great holiday, my friend.
You too. Thank you.
All right. That was Doug Decinces, former Baltimore Oriole and